McQuestion, for over 28 years talking about things that matter with people who care. Production of McQuestion is made possible in part by individual viewers, supporters of the Foundation for Responsible Television, the University of Texas at Dallas, creating the future.
Well, welcome to the program. I'm obviously Dennis McQuestion, and I'm not exactly sitting in a studio, and this is the first time in our 30 years being on the air that we've ever done anything like this. Given the situation, it may not be the last time, but we have a really interesting program to talk about and look at really the oil and gas situation and the economic situation in view of everything that's happened in the last few weeks. So joining me is my co-host, Jim Falk, and Jim, as many of you know, I've seen him lately with us, and he is the CEO of the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth as well. And Jim, you're going to introduce one of our guests right now, so why don't you go ahead and do that, and let's talk about oil and gas and where we are.
So to shed light on how COVID-19 is and will continue to impact our economy, we are joined by Ken Hirsch. He's the president and CEO of the George W. Bush Presidential Center, and he's also the co-founder and former CEO of NGP Energy Capital Management, a private equity investment firm. He currently serves as senior advisor to the Carlyle Group's Natural Resources Division. Ken, it's great to see you, and thanks for being our guest today.
Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
So I was looking this morning, here we are in mid-April at the price of West Texas Intermediate, and it went under $20. And this is just a few days after President Trump was working with Saudi Arabia and Russia, hopefully to reach some type of an agreement to stabilize prices. Doesn't look like that's quite happened. What's your insight?
Well, my insight is I'm 35 years old again, although I got a lot less hair. It is absolutely stunning what has happened in the oil markets. It had started as a price war before the virus pandemic, and then the demand destruction as a result of the pandemic has just been stunning. Let me just give you some numbers to put it, some simple numbers to put it in perspective. The world supplies and demands plus or minus 100 million barrels of oil per day, so it's easy to remember. We right now globally are running a 30 million barrel a day drop in demand. Now, OPEC produces about 30 million barrels a day. So in order to balance the market, normally what happens is price is the governor, and then people respond to the price signals and regulate investment, which causes production to go up or down. A 10 million barrel a day drop in our agreement to pull 10 million barrels a day off the market would not balance the market. So right now we're in this maximum uncertainty phase where the shutdown has created the big drop, and the market understands that that's temporary. So the big question is, when the shutdown is over, where is the new normal in oil demand? We have some early signals of that, because you can look in areas like South Korea and like China where they've reopened, and in Hong Kong where they've started to reopen after the pandemic has kind of swept through. Early estimates may be that it's a 10% drop from the pre-virus normal. So that means we're in kind of a 90 million barrel a day new normal of demand. And so in that market, a 10 million barrel a day withdrawal from the market would be about right to balance the market. So I think that we need to not look at what today's price is, although it is absolutely horrific from a producer standpoint. You basically can't function. So the oil and gas business is no different than the neighborhood restaurant. And you might have a little takeout going and a little curbside delivery, but you're not covering your costs, you're not covering your rent. So you're really slowly going out of business. You're just eating into your cash reserves. So that's exactly what's happened in the oil and gas industry today. And it's probably true globally. There's nobody who can make money and have enough free cash flow to reinvest at today's prices.
So when you focus on what's happening in Texas, I mean, of course, lots of people are losing their jobs in the oil service sector. I read recently how Halliburton is furloughing, laying off truly thousands of people. But what about the actual production and the situation where you're shutting in wells throughout the Permian?
Sure. So the first thing you do if you're running an oil and gas field is if it breaks, you don't go fix it. Okay. But if it's pumping, and doesn't have a very high marginal cost on a day-to-day basis, you basically do what you can to keep it going. And so there are two aspects of I'll call them shut-ins. There's the physical going around and actually turning off your wells. That is you would only do that in really high cost production where you do have daily operating costs in excess of today's prices. The second is just the lack of investment in keeping your production up causes the natural declines to take over. And so the natural declines that we're going to be talking about in the US and in Texas is going to be north of 20%. So it would not surprise me for the United States to lose 2 to 3 million barrels a day of production really starting this summer and moving into the first quarter of next year. But it does take a little while for that to catch up. That's kind of a 4 to 6 month phenomenon. So we'll see the US really start to contract in the middle of the summer.
What type of washout do you think we might see with some of the oil and gas independent companies that don't have the financial strength to weather this storm?
It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
Will we see some of the larger companies, the majors, will they be purchasing the assets or the companies?
Well, the wells don't know who owns them. They don't know if the equity owns them or the bank owns them. The wells just pump. Okay. So right now, what the transition is between the companies that have good balance sheets and the companies that don't. And the companies that don't have good balance sheets, ultimately their lenders are going to be now their owners. So then it's going to be up to the lenders, who now are their owners, to decide, what are we going to do with it? Are we just going to sell it and then put it on the market and see who the buyers are? It's not like there is a process that we go through in this country, thankfully, where we sort this out. And in many cases, what this is not dissimilar to what happened in the real estate business in the financial crisis, where it was amend and pretend and extend, right? And so the banks aren't equipped to operate oil and gas wells. Some of the banks are taking more aggressive stance that I've read, but that will remain to be seen.
Well, one of the things that really financed and supported all this exploration, especially with fracking, was investors. And that money's really dried up, hasn't it? It was already drying up before the virus.
That's right. And we have a market economy, and that's what happens in a market economy, is that investment turns off. And when investment turns off, the natural declines take over, and then supply drops. And then now here's the difference. In a normal market, low prices cure low prices and high prices cure high prices, right? Low prices cause the supply drop, but they also cause a demand increase. So in this case, we've seen, gasoline here in town is $1.50 a gallon. I feel like I'm 25 years old again. That to me is also a dramatic signal. Normally that would cause an increase in demand. Okay, and so that will be the real telltale sign, is when demand follows that price signal. And I think that takes a good year to 2 years to sink in.
How important is jet fuel in all of this? Because when you have the aviation industry essentially shut down, and I think, see what you think about this, but I think it's going to take several months for Americans to really, around the world, for people to feel comfortable flying again.
Yeah, and I think that it will. Jet fuel is about 10% of the U.S. demand, so I think that's something that will pick up and be more slow. We just have to wait and see.
Yeah, Ken, let me jump in there, because there are, let's just say, events happening here in Texas that